Do you foresee a time when, when Iran might return to a multi-party system? Is this a temporary measure to meet a crisis, or do you think this is the kind of political system best suited to your country more or less permanently?
All will depend on the will of the people, finally, because I'm not eternal, and there will be the after-me time. But I think that we have just taken what is good for this country. And I even sometimes wonder if this multi-party system is good for those who have it elsewhere.
After nearly 13 years, the Shah replaced his Prime Minister, Hoveyda, with Jamshid Amouzegar. Then, when Iran's Arab neighbors lifted the oil boycott, the price of oil fell and the bonanza was over. The Shah continued to expand the army, but most of his ambitious industrial and economic projects were stalled.
This came to a bad moment when oil prices leveled off in '75, and the boom that they had created in Iran began to stagnate or subside. A lot of people who had been called in from the village to work on construction projects were left without work, and I think it provided a kind of tinder for the revolution that was to come.
On the 31st of December 1977, Jimmy Carter and his wife celebrated the New Year in Iran.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah, is an island of stability in one of the more troubled areas of the world. This is a great tribute to you, Your Majesty, and to your leadership, and to the respect and the admiration and love which your people give to you.
I watched President Carter on TV toasting the Shah on New Year's Eve and thought it was one of the silliest things I had ever seen, especially when the Shah lifted his champagne glass. And I thought, we're in a Muslim country. He's celebrating an American holiday by toasting with alcohol. Isn't this dumb? Doesn't he know anything about his own country or the people in his own country?
Within a week of President Carter's visit, the Shah made what may have been the biggest mistake of his reign. Ayatollah Khomeini's son had died in mysterious circumstances in Najaf 2 months earlier. The word on the street was that Savak, acting on the Shah's orders, had killed him. Hoveyda, the former prime minister, was given the task of planting an article in the press rebutting the claims. It was the first mention of Ayatollah Khomeini's name in a national newspaper since his expulsion in 1964. The article accused Ayatollah Khomeini of being an anti-revolutionary agent of the British. It had an incendiary effect. Thousands of protesters poured onto the streets. It wasn't just Tehran. Chanting crowds emerged in several cities. The name on their tongues, Khomeini.
I think most older Iranians knew his name, but a lot of younger ones had not heard it, because I asked younger people and they literally did not know. And later on, as the revolution became hotter and hotter, and more people were getting involved in it, I would ask them when they had first heard the name Khomeini, and they would admit that I just heard it this year, a couple of months ago.
The army brought the protests to a swift end by opening fire on the demonstrators. But although the Shah still didn't know it, a 77-year-old exiled cleric now posed a real threat to his regime. In part 2, in 2 weeks' time, the Shah's final tumultuous year and the triumphant return of an Ayatollah.
find out more, go to bbcworldnews.com/click.
The President of Pakistan, Asif Zardari, says the Taliban have established themselves across a large part of his country, forcing it into a fight against the movement that's about Pakistan's very survival. Mr. Zardari said the Taliban were trying to take over the state of Pakistan. Meanwhile, an American missile attack in Pakistan has killed at least 25 people. The target, a house used by Taliban militants near the border with Afghanistan. Here's Richard Slee.
This remote border region is thought to be the hiding place of prominent Taliban and Al-Qaeda leaders, including Osama bin Laden. The target of this attack is believed to have been the followers of the Pakistani Taliban leader Baitullah Masood. Locals claim that a house was hit by 2 missiles fired from a drone. Masood is said to be responsible for a number of major terrorist attacks, including the assassination of former Pakistan Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. In the past few months, there have been dozens of similar missile attacks in the region. But just a few days ago, Pakistani leaders told visiting US envoy Richard Holbrooke that the strikes killed too many civilians and they undermine the government's own efforts at counterinsurgency. And there does now seem to be some urgency in the fight against the militants. This weekend, President Asif Zardari is warning that the Taliban have established themselves across a large part of Pakistan and that his country's very survival is at stake. Mr. Zardari says the government's been in denial about the Taliban in the past, displaying weaknesses that were now being exploited by the militants. It's a dramatic claim that, if correct, means that Pakistan and the US will need to remain strong allies to combat that threat. Richard Slee, BBC News.
Stabilising the world economy, that's been set as the highest priority, their words, not ours, by the G7, the group of 7 wealthy nations, in a final declaration following their meeting in Rome. The finance ministers also repeated their commitment to free trade as concern grows that protectionism is